Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 270 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to finish up with the iron sheet coil build, make some coolant for it, and see how it all works. Enjoy! As far as space, I'm thinking, believe it or not, it will probably fit. Because we're only going to need 6 machines to actually make the coils, and we only need the one set of machines because they're running on molten iron, not any of the ingots. So that's why those two setups were separated, the ingots part and the molten iron part, because we only need this one set of machines. It's just the other element of it that's going to have to run are these cooling towers. But luckily, we only need one cooling tower for each temperature of coolant, and then probably one steam engine for each of these to consume the steam. We'd have to look at those numbers. And then the filtration units. So there's going to be a little side section of this handling all of that. And we also are going to need to supply coolant. But I think we're doing pretty good. So I guess we'll just pull this up, the thing that's requesting the iron ingots. Our inventory is full of junk, as it always seems to be. And this road is kind of in the way too. Luckily, we're probably not going to need any of this water anymore. So I'm just going to completely get rid of it. And we might want to change the position of these train stations and mash them in if possible. So for now, I might make it a little less work on myself if I only pull up the road here. And also make some room in the inventory. We'll just have to move the road wherever it makes sense. Well, we have a space that all of this has to fit in. Let's see what we can do. Well, luckily it's not really belt limited. It says 34, but we really only need 30 per second. So 6 machines is not very many. Actually, they would probably just fit just the classic way of one on each side. And we have our 2 methods here. We'll use the method using coolant. And I think the reason why it's more than 30 is because our input is set based on 120 ingots, which is what we can produce. Knowing that, we might want to build this bigger, although, because we're going to have access to blue belts, if we just wait a little bit, and I will make note of that, I'm trying to remember all of the places where blue belts could be useful. Because why build this bigger when it really doesn't need to be bigger now, but later it would be useful? Okay, well each one of these machines individually isn't going to be particularly fast. Just 6 coils a second, so a single inserter. So the only real concern is handling all of the pipes. So we have the inputs and the outputs, and it would probably be more square if we had those pipes on the outside. So our belt of 30 would go here. And each one of these would do pretty much exactly the 6 that we would need, which isn't great. Even though we have more machines than we need, let's just make sure throughput is not an issue by making them red. But it also needs its side element of the cooling towers and the filtration units. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to calculate using the steam there, but maybe just looking at the steam engines themselves will tell us. Yes, the consumption is 30 per second. So if each one of these is doing 80, then we will need to have 3 steam engines per setup. And it's already in steam form, which means we don't need to have any other parts of the power production chain involved in this. I don't think we're actually making cooling towers. So what would be involved in those? Let's grab another thing here. Not even sure where it would be. Cooling tower. Well, luckily it doesn't take too much to make. And some filtration units. How about just a stack of them? And another thing is we're actually going to need to figure out how much coolant we're actually going to want to make for all of this. And short of putting every single setup in a line here, just to find out how much coolant would need to be made, how about we just guess? Be a lot easier, especially because it looks like it's going to be made rather quickly with fairly low input requirements, and it's all liquid too, so if we need more machines we can just put more machines in there. But you see how it only requires a fraction of a chemical plant. So I don't know, I think if we had like 3 or 4 of them in there, we would be fine. And then the question is, do we want to send a train up here? Or send the liquid? Because the lubricant is already making it up here, but am I forgetting what goes into it? Because I keep thinking it's lubricant, but it's actually mineral oil. So where is the nearest mineral oil? We know it's being made here. And it's only going towards the fish setup and to making lubricant. I don't think we're actually using it for anything. So that is an issue. The amount will be big enough that we will have a significant concern for throughput. But do we really want to do a train? Because the nearest train station would be right here. So we would have to have a new line. And if it's already going up here, is it really that much more for it to just go up here and then like across and then hit all of the necessary places? Like, it actually wouldn't even need to go that far. It would probably only come up to around here or somewhere around there where it would make the coolant. And then the coolant would come along. And the coolant was already going to go along this entire setup, supplying coolant everywhere it needed to be. So actually, just having a line of pipe would probably be fine there. And looks like the bots finally decided to get here. And making us some cooling towers. Let's just grab a few. I think that's a few too many, but we're looking good. Okay, the coolant needs to go through its several stages of cooling towers. Maybe going up like this. It needs to cool it from 300, which will create some steam, and then a through pipe. And we need to remember that there needs to be room for the water. So if we do that, it should still fit. So this one will handle stage 2. This one will handle stage 3. And then the output will be the coolant that needs to be cleaned. So we'll do that. And then each one of these, if they are producing 85 steam, and each steam engine uses 30, then that's a lot of free steam. We'll just hook these up here, I suppose. And believe it or not, these are the things that take up a lot of space. Annoyingly so. Well, I kind of don't want them to, because I want this to be as narrow as reasonably possible. Because although iron has a lot of methods of production, the other resources less so. So I'm wondering if instead I would rather this go straight up. And then it's kind of funny, it doing a bit of a zigzag. But it can go under and then do the exact same thing. So that's cooling from 300, cooling from 200. Although, because of the position of the pipes there, these would need to be separated a bit more than they are. Just kind of a lot of pipes. So it's a little annoying, but I think it's quite important that these are mashed in pretty close. And the steam engines there. Do we even have turbines? Oh man, it's just a cobalt thing. So almost, but don't quite have it. But this is a little narrower because it's making these go up instead of sideways, which I think takes up slightly less space. And there is an inherent disadvantage with hooking these up like this, and that's that it's always going to be on our electrical network, because right now it's set up to where, well, ideally it would be set up to where steam engines that weren't on would not even be hooked up at all. But some of them do seem to be hooked up, and I'm not terribly sure where. I guess it would be these ones. Well, they're running now. But that's kind of the idea. But that just makes it so the power that's being reported makes more sense, because if you have steam engines that are hooked up but have no input resource, it'll make it look like you have a certain amount of production capacity when you really don't. But there's really no easy way of doing this other than hooking up with logic, like was done kind of down here, or really anywhere else that uses power to disconnect like the solar panels from being on the network if we didn't need them. But that means we would have to have this set up for every one of these. And we would need to have some kind of storage tank as well in order to make sure that they weren't included. So it would be a storage tank for each one of these. So storage tank, storage tank, storage tank. So 3 storage tanks plus logic for each one of them. Which just sounds like more work than it is worth. So let's just go with this. So the water would go in there, the steam's getting produced. The input would come through there, then there's our output. Well, I guess we could try to figure out how to smash this in here. We could probably just line it up with that pipe right there, because it's already there. It would space it up by 1, but the pipes would be straight. We would need water from somewhere. It's actually a pretty reasonable amount of water. 257, but I'm pretty sure 1 pump jack can do that. So hopefully this setup isn't too big. And actually one other thing that we could do is move the part that handles cooling the coolant somewhere else that wasn't right here, so they didn't have to be side by side if we wanted to potentially save some space. Let's see what these would look like now. We would need to handle the coal filters, which is super easy to do on one machine, so that's not a problem. In fact, because of that, is it worth just sending the filters themselves on a belt for every single location? Probably, considering the rate is so low, it would make each one of these setups simpler. If each one didn't have to have coal being delivered to it. But we have this set up here making our coolant, and it can just go off to the side here and go back down. Let's line it up like right here. Because then we will have our input of the fresh coolant. And then we definitely will need a storage tank here somewhere. It could be a small one. Taking input from whatever pipe is going to actually handle that. And if this ever gets low, let's say like 16,000. So if it gets below 80%, then the coolant from the main coolant pipe can come in here to top this off. Otherwise, this would just keep running in a loop. And there's the whole shebang. I do not like the cooling tower part of it. I can't help but feel there's got to be a better way to mash all these in here. So rather than rebuild the same thing again, let's come over here and do some theory crafting. Because I think they could be closer together if they were like this. And it would be kind of funny if they are rotated around like this. But it could work. where the output snakes its way around, so too will the water, and so too will the steam. Then the advantage being these potentially could be much closer. Can't build on road, huh? Well, okay then. So I believe that gets the steam hooked up to each thing. And this looks like it takes up a lot less space than that. Guess we can check here. Well, it looks like it, but when you include the size of the pipes in here, it basically works out to the same size. So I might be doing a fool's errand here, trying to make this more compact. Another thing is to just mix all the steam together. I don't think it would cause any problems. So if that was done, what would it look like? We'd still need to have like the full number of these. They would just be interconnected. Although doing it this way does make each one properly separated anyway. So that gets all the water hooked up. The input snakes around. The steams go to where they need to go. I think that's everything. And I believe it's a lot more compact than what we have. Used coolant would just go through there. The cooled down coolant would come through here. It would need to be lined up with one of these machines here. Could either be up here or down there. This wouldn't really compete with anything, or this might make it kind of an awkward shape. So we'll just put it right there. Then the clean coolant can just come through there. So I super duper hope that all those pipes are in the correct positions. I think they are. Filters would need to come in and also leave and get sent to wherever in the factory was handling all of them. And since their speeds are so slow, single inserters, both directions work fine. Don't need to have buffers or anything for these filter frames if they're all handled by one central setup. Then I think that's everything. So then we can figure out what's the cleanest place to put it. It's still a little wider than I would want it to be. But I think this is about as squished as we can really make it. So let's just line it up with the edge here and go from there. And if we mush it in there, it looks like it fits, but this probably won't be the case for other setups that use multiple input resources. It's kind of hard to tell now that the inputs are gone. Uh-oh. It's holding. Kind of. But actually, Beta Revolution down to 42%, so that's nice. But some of these setups that use multiple resource types, like the tinned copper wire here that uses both tin and copper, these setups will be slightly bigger because they'll have more pipes. It is rather annoying, but this is probably going to be the limiting factor here in how big this can be. It's just the width of this. And when you look at its size compared to other things, I guess we can just kind of place it down. It's about the same as certain setups, but other ones, it's definitely larger. Like larger than almost everything. Which is kind of annoying. The other method is to stack them vertically to make them more narrow, but it looks a little weird for iron because of how wide iron is, but the other setups just won't be that big. And there really isn't enough room to stack them up, so We'll probably just have to place them like this and smush them in and see how much space it takes. If we have to come all the way out here, then so be it, I suppose. The other option is the annoying way of separating the cooling towers and putting them up here somewhere, and then doing the coolant like up here and then sending it back down. And that's a lot of not square. And it sounds like that would be really annoying to like place pipes and things, so I think I'd rather have the setups be a square unit like this, where everything just fits together, than do all of that other stuff. Alright, well, we've got to get everything else hooked up here. We're waiting on robots. But we can get the water. And we'll worry about hooking up the iron when everything's actually said and done. As far as where to put the train station, this seems fine. It's just going to be kind of funny what's going to happen with the belt, how it's going to turn a little bit, but it is what it is here. Is this going to make that jump? No. Well, I think I'd rather it not go over the lights if possible, so we'll just do this. So the other two elements of this are the setups making the coolant and making the filters, both of which are going to be pretty small. Especially with the filters, I bet one assembling machine could supply the entire line of machines here. Well, it would require coal, and if it's going to operate anywhere, why not operate down here where there's coal? So we need to send a belt down there, and I'm not sure where we'd want to do it. It might be a little weird, but we do know that the space between the tracks is going to be available. So that's a potential spot to use, if it would work without being super weird. It's like that would come through there and to any necessary undergrounds. And then this belt would come up, and then would have to come back, which would be awkward. Or, actually, be kind of weird as well, to go down and use the bus. There are some extra spaces here. It looks like we've got 5 belts. It would take up a little bit of the space that goes between each setup, but I feel like if we have a bus, we should use it. It is there after all, and it has room. So they're kind of jumping over each other a little bit here, but something like that. Let's see, these pipes are not in the best of places. Now that we have a bus here, they can just jump over the lines. So we'll just keep this coming back. And we need more bus lines, but oh well. Oh no. Stuff in the way. Well, I kind of don't want to tear all that out quite yet. So we'll just send it down here for now, and then... Oh wow, that's so far. The belts can't even jump. We'll just make use of what we have here. And we have tons of space to do this. Not that we need much of any. But hey, let's just put one right here. Needing coal filters. And I didn't even put all the speed modules in here. Let's just see what it could do at full blast. Well, plenty. As you can see, it would be easily able to keep up with the entire belt. So there we go. So I guess efficiency and pollution in here. So now that we have a rate, what are we looking at? 6 per second. So just one stack inserter. And having a buffer would help, as it tends to. And we'll send the whole output straight through, because we are going to want some amount of buffer in here. How much is hard to say, but we will want something. Then the used filters will come back this way. Well, I do want to kind of pick up some belts, at least for the purposes of getting more because I don't want to fly back to the bus just for a few belts. How many are we making? 1,000. Let's go with 2,000 for now. Let's see, we probably wouldn't want to store the empty filters here, but it will make it easier to insert them into the system if we've got that. In the end, it'll all get stored into here anyway, so that should be fine. Let's see, that's going pretty fast. Actually, seems like it's kind of limited based on these inserters here. But it's not like we need to have 30 per second. And they're gone. So we'll just let that go for now. Looks like a bot crash there. It's not quite within the network yet. We can unhook the filters for now, just so we can watch it. And it looks like they got reversed. Because it's kind of nice. Let's do near to see this all start running. Most of this is hooked up, but we do need to get our fresh coolant, and we'll need to make that from somewhere. It'll probably be all the way down here at the end, and actually going between the tracks might be a reasonable way of doing this. Although doing it up here might be slightly less annoying. Just to make sure we don't run into anything. Of course, as I say that, it's ending up running into things anyway. Okay, that gets hooked up there. We need to make this somewhere, and really, we could probably just send the coolant up there on its own pipe. I don't know if we'd actually need the mineral oil for anything else. So that can just be made all the way down here where it's actually nearby. And I think we kind of determined that we probably wouldn't need that many machines. So let's do like 4 of them. And let's see, that's connected there, so we probably want to pull it from after that point. So I don't know, like maybe 4 of them kind of jammed in here. Just as long as we can find a place for the pipe up there. Making coolant. It's perhaps a little too jammed in there because it's going to be right next to that. It's starting to make me uncomfortable how close everything in the factory is starting to get, but that's kind of how it is. Things were spaced apart for as long as is about reasonable. But now it's getting to the point where once the factory wants to become truly massive, things are going to have to be rebuilt much further apart from each other. So these can't use productivities. Nope. And they'll need water. How much will all of these need? Quite a bit. 880. But that's only 2 pump jacks. Although we've actually got a ton of them. How in the world did I end up with 20 of these in my inventory? Must have picked them up from somewhere. There we go. We'll just mash them in here. Although it doesn't quite work, but it does with the zigzag. And they made their coolant very quickly. And we probably should pressurize this, considering the distance that it's moving. Don't need to have any logic or anything connected to it. Hopefully I lined this up correctly. Looks like this is probably one of the last spots that was still available. And then we can go up or to the right. Actually, up probably makes more sense because when we expand this to include the new resources, it'll probably be all the way out here. One thing we could potentially do is use modules and potentially beacons to make this a lot smaller. I definitely, I'm trying to avoid the use of beacons, but I understand that some people would probably want me to make some builds with it just to see how I would handle it. But for certain things that are that big, it might be useful. Because that's a pretty big square. That, in fact, might be one of the biggest single squares of something, perhaps only beaten by this, of a single production. But since we're rebuilding that element of resource production, we'll probably end up touching on it at some point. Okay, here's our pipe. And hopefully that makes it all the way down here. And it looks like it has, except for being hooked up. So hook that up, and coolant level's going way down because we are needing a ton of it right now. But it's only to get this mostly filled up. Then when it becomes mostly filled up, the rest of that tops up. So that shows you like how fast our production actually is and how little of this we're going to need. Hey, the filter frames made it. It would be kind of nice to send a few more down here before we hook this up, because I'm not terribly sure how many it's actually going to need when it's running. Luckily, they're close to the teleporter. But our inventory is full. How are we doing on the biter orbs, by the way? 77,000, so it seems like you can actually keep up with evolution pretty well by just using the orbs that they give you. Because we're almost below 40 now. So it is working quite well. I don't know if there's a combinator that looks at biter evolution. Seems like not something you would need to control very often. But that would be interesting to have that set up that way. But I think we'll just have to go down there and manually turn it on and off as required. But all of this is hooked up. The molten iron is ready. Actually, hold up a second here. Making a mess. Oh, they're going to take them back. Because we actually need to hook these filters up first. There we go. Get in there. Okay, I think we're ready to give this a shot. It's been a long time coming to actually see the whole process working, at least even for just one resource. But here we are. It should basically have everything it needs. So once the molten iron gets hooked up, everything should work, and it doesn't really matter if it gets hooked up to which pipe, but let's just use this one right there, because we can. And there they go. They are quite fast. There's the coolant towers, and one potential limitation actually of this is if we can't use this steam, then this is going to be limited in its output. So that's kind of annoying. I didn't really leave any systems in place for that, so that might be bad. But most of the time our factory is set up to where the accumulators are not fully charged, so there should always be some space to put them. So we'll want to make sure that continues. Man, look how fast those go. Using the full 4 belts of input. And looks like we're getting fairly close to maxing out the belt, but not quite. It always helps to have 2 of them on the very end. That's got them mostly filled out. It's doing a great job. Seems like we're not really using very many of these. Let's see, we are producing 300 used coolant, so this will have to clean 300, and it seems like it would be, but I guess there's an extra one in there? It seems like it. Maybe I did the math wrong. It says 2. Although that is for the increased rate of more than 30 per second, so if it's just 30 per second, you only need the 2. So we probably should have this 3rd machine in here in case we want to expand this to blue belts in the future and get a slightly higher output, because our factory could keep up with it. Alright, well that's running well. So what does it look like down here? Well, this about makes sense because it's running at half speed, because it can actually do 8 belts. Is power doing okay? Yeah, it's actually not that bad. So it's using about half of the belts of ore there. And nothing much is happening down here because it was actually quite high. And it's really not going down that fast, considering what's being made of it. So because we've been messing with a bunch of stuff, we have kind of a lot of extra resources just sitting in places. So some of this stuff's going to need to run for a while for it to balance out and actually get back to normal. But yeah, I am worried about the steam. That if that doesn't work, we'll need to have some kind of flare stack bypass in there, and there really isn't enough room for those pipes right now, considering how close all this is, so I'm kind of worried. I really want these setups to just fit in this space. It's not much, but if I can avoid moving these tracks, I'd really want to avoid moving the tracks. Okay, well that's making our coils. We do have a road right here. It's almost certainly going to move. But we do need to supply some iron coils. Let's output it on the right so we can make concrete. Now let's do like 1,000 here. So now that that gets supplied, finally it's making a request. And we do technically have a little bit of steel left. That probably won't be the case for long. Oh, it's nice to see us making some sulfur again that's not being made from our generator. We're not really making any requests for iron yet, so there's not much to see there. And we're not completely out of the steel yet, so concrete production will continue. So from here, we might as well expand into making the copper sheet coils. But that's going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.